let me echo the sentiment. It is an honor to serve in the United States House of Representatives. It was an honor to serve in the House of Representatives. And it would be an honor to serve in the United States Senate. In 1994, when the Republican leadership suggested a contract with America that had 10 items, the contract with America came to the candidates that were running for office, both incumbent and challengers, to ask the candidates to sign the contract with America. And the contract said, I will vote for the following 10 items, including a constitutional amendment for term limits. I did not support the constitutional amendment for term limits at that time. And so therefore I declined to sign the contract with America. Because several other candidates for the House declined likewise, the leadership decided to revise the terms of the contract and say, can you sign this if you will commit to allowing for consideration on the floor of the House the following 10 items, which meant that the House of Representatives would have a vote on a constitutional amendment, an actual vote to amend the Constitution, creating term limits. Well, I was fine with that, and I signed that second version of the contract with America. And when the resolution came to the floor to be considered, I voted for the rule to allow its consideration, to allow it to be voted on, and it was an historic vote. Never in the history of the House had a constitutional amendment been proposed on the House and voted on by the House to limit the terms of members of Congress. I opposed it at that time because I believed that the Constitution should be amended only in those cases where there is there is an omission, there is a shortcoming, you might say, of the Constitution. I believe that the people can decide who they wish to represent them, and that by limiting, by this constitutional amendment, you take that freedom away from them, and you tell them who, at least in one very limited sense, who they can't vote for to represent them. That's my idealistic side. Now, let me tell you a little bit about the practical side, based on my experience there and my observations since then. If in your case, and you've gone one longer, so it'll be maybe a little more difficult to put it across. But in your particular case, the candidate runs for the Senate the first time. They are elected in this hypothetical situation, and they serve well, and they run for re-election, and they are accountable to the people, and they come back and they stand for re-election, and they are re-elected for a second time. Then they come back and stand for a third election, and because of their service, their meritorious service for the first 2 terms, they decide that they will run for a third term. In that third term, in that third 6-year period of time, who is that senator accountable to? No one. And we are now operating under a situation whereby we effectively have a term-limited junior senator from the state of Indiana. Now, when was the last town hall meeting that Senator Bayh had in Zionsville?
When was the last one Lugar had?
But, and so we by law make them not accountable to the people, and we make them accountable only to their next employer. You know, it's very similar to what happens in the private sector when you unfortunately possibly get that notice that you have 6 more weeks on the job. In that 6 weeks that you have, that you know you're going to be leaving that company, what is the first thing on your mind? What is the primary thing on your mind? Your next job. What am I going to do next? And so for 6 years, that senator is going to probably be asking, what are they going to do next? Now, this is under the perception that these people are all crooks. I don't believe they're all crooks. Unfortunately, there are a few recently that have done things that have made the entire institution look terrible. But what we're seeing in 2010, quite honestly, is exactly what the founders had in mind when they established this constitutional republic. This idea that the people would never allow the government to take their liberties from them, because they knew that the politicians were not the maintainers of their liberty. They were not the custodians of our individual liberty. Who is the custodian of our respective liberties? First three words of the preamble. We the people. And what you're going to see in November of 2010, I believe, is exactly what the genius of the founders knew would preserve this republic. Not politicians that we sent to Washington, D.C. and forgot about, because that's their job, that's not our job. John Adams said we must all be, to a certain extent, a statesman. We must all be vigilant to preserve our individual liberties. And therefore, what we're seeing now, what I'm seeing now, and what I'm seeing all over the state, is exactly what Hamilton, what Madison, what Sherman, what Pinckney, what Washington, what they all had in mind when they said we're going to give the people the vote and we're going to let them elect their representatives. And so I believe that idealistically and realistically that term limits would not necessarily stop crooks from serving in government, nor would it stop them from causing the problems that we have today. It would merely limit the tenure of the crook. They just have to work a little faster in order to get done what they need to get done.